Welcome to the Transforming Trauma podcast. Transforming Trauma is presented by the NARM Training Institute. I'm your host, Emily Ruth, and I'm so glad you've joined us today. Hi, Transforming Trauma listeners. Do you want to join the international NARM community in support of trauma-informed care? If so, please consider joining us to become trained in the neuroaffective relational model. We are excited to offer 2 starting levels of professional trainings designed to support those of you working with clients or populations dealing with the effects of adverse childhood experiences and complex trauma. The Level 1 online NARM Basics training is a psychoeducational training designed for helping professionals in a variety of fields, such as mental health professionals, substance abuse counselors, educators, doctors, nurses, other healthcare providers, coaches, and more. The Level 2 NARM Therapist training is a comprehensive clinical training designed for licensed mental health professionals, as well as current mental health graduate students and clinical interns and trainees. For more information on these NARM trainings and to apply, please visit www.narmtraining.com/schedule. Today's episode is a conversation between NARM senior faculty, Brad Kammer, Stefanie Klein, and Marcia Black, as they reflect on the developments of the NARM community, as well as what they learned as NARM trainers and consultants in 2023. Brad Kammer is a licensed marriage and family therapist and professional clinical counselor. Brad is trained as a body-mind psychotherapist and co-authored The Practical Guide for Healing Developmental Trauma. Marcia Black is a licensed clinical psychologist with a background in attachment, relational, and intersubjective approaches. She has been in private practice for over 35 years in San Francisco and the East Bay Area. Lastly, Stefanie Klein is a licensed clinical social worker and has spent 22 years in her Los Angeles private practice, specializing in treating adults with trauma and anxiety disorders. Please enjoy this episode with Brad, Stefanie, and Marcia. All right. Well, I'm excited to be together again. Welcome back to Transforming Trauma.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emily.
Well, we've enjoyed this tradition of getting together and reflecting on the past year and sharing enthusiasm about the upcoming plans for the Institute for 3 years now, which is always a highlight of the year for me. And so I was hoping we could kind of go around and each of you share what each of you would like from our time together in our conversation today. Brad, can we start with you?
Sure. Happy to start. First of all, just a pleasure to be with the 3 of you. And yeah, it feels like a tradition that we get to be together. And there's something about for Stefanie, Marcia, and I being the NARM faculty in North America that we're holding the training programs, we're holding and teaching the levels 1, 2, and 3, the training programs. And the community continues to grow and our roles continue to grow and evolve. And it's just fun to kind of reflect on this year and be together and envision what's coming next.
All right. Thank you.
You want to go, Marcia?
Sure. I was reflecting on our podcast last year and went back and listened to it. And I remember I shared one of my favorite quotes from Jung: learn all the skills and the techniques, but when you're with another human soul, be just another human soul. And for me, the masterpiece of this year, the really highlight, was the masterclass in which I think we really walked the walk of that in the way that Brad and the training assistants supported the students in being able to be in their own process and to really be able to highlight how the NARM approach really is one of mutual self-discovery, where if we do our own work and own, vulnerability and humanity, then we're able to be with our clients in a different way. And so I would love to have our listeners get a sense of that, as well as to get a sense of how our mentoring program really demonstrates that in a layered way.
Thank you.
I guess mine's kind of similar in that, the foundation of healing complex trauma is all about connection, connection to our hearts, connection to ourselves, connection to other people, reconnecting. And these annual podcasts that we do together is just a really sweet opportunity for us to connect and reflect and sort of be together in a way that, we're always so busy getting everything done and supporting all of the trainings that we don't get to just kind of be with and think about what we're creating here. And so I just hope in these episodes that we get to do this once a year, that people feel into the spirit of connection, which is so much the foundation of healing. And really the magic part of what gets created in a lot of these training cohorts and on the training teams, the connection with each other.
Thank you. That's a really sweet way to lead into what I was hoping I could hear more from each of you in terms of if you could share some of the learning that each of you have had and the ways that you've been engaged with your roles as trainers and consultants and mentors.
Reflecting.
Yeah, reflecting, taking a moment to sit with that.
I don't know. It's like with every year, something deepens. It's like something deepens in terms of how I understand the material. Like with every time I teach an OBT, with every group consult I do, no matter what level, it's just amazing how it keeps deepening, which is a huge takeaway. And the more that that's reinforced in me year after year after year, consult after consult, module after module, whether I'm, TAing, whether I'm floating and hearing the material that Brad's presenting, or whether I'm, teaching it myself, the fact that it keeps deepening is incredibly exciting and helps me hold this perspective for the students as well, and the TAs, the people that I'm mentoring, hold this perspective that there really isn't any kind of finish line here, that there really isn't anywhere we're trying to get. Like, it's not just a meme, it's true. Like, there's nowhere that we show this meme in the trainings that you're not lost unless you're trying to get anywhere. There's really nowhere to get. It's just this beautiful process of continuing to be exactly where we are. And by trusting that, somehow we grow and somehow we get more effective. Somehow we integrate and understand things more deeply.
Yeah.
I think some of the learning for me is just around, well, it starts by really honoring people that come into our trainings. Our trainings are deeply experiential. So people are bringing their own experience into the trainings and just honoring the courage, the vulnerability, the willingness to really engage in the learning from the inside out. There's so many trainings out there that you could take that you learn all the skills and you learn the protocols, but NARM is a depth-oriented, somatic-based model that really requires us to embody it and to be in the experience of it. And every year when we do this reflection, I just think to all the experiences the three of us have had this year of sitting both in groups and one-on-one with students and participants, and just all the different learning that happens for them, for their clients, for us as the instructors or the consultants. And just what a wonderful gift to be part of a community of people that are just willing to be open to that level of learning and depth and connection and being in the messiness and the unknown and the discovery process. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about this later, because some deeper learning that's part of the vision for where we want to go in the future is just about something that's being satisfied for many of us that come in this professional training, not just about our clinical work, but about something inside of us that actually reinforces or deepens our clinical work, that has to do more with something for us personally in our role as therapists or helping professionals. So that's always not just learning for me, but I just feel like it's a sacred gift to be part of a professional community of other people that are not only interested in doing this, but really are committed to this kind of learning.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so special.
I mean, I guess I would add, I feel like a tremendous amount of gratitude and appreciation for the students' willingness to take a deep dive into their vulnerability. I think last year I might have mentioned a student had written in an evaluation that NARM was the first training they'd ever been in where the therapist experience counted. And in the master's class, which is, had a huge impact on me, we really take a deeper dive into that. And in my experience of that, being with students willing to look at what's in their way of being able to show up with clients with their own authenticity and to be able to see them with compassion and clarity and openness also has asked of me the same thing as I mentor the training assistants. I have to look at my own vulnerability and what gets in my own way. And I love that layering in NARM, but it's also a very tender experience. And I feel grateful for students' willingness, but also for the opportunity myself to go into those spaces. And it's created an amazing field that, kind of even in the hybrid version of the master's class, the people online, I think, could also feel the heartfulness and the tenderness that we were all creating for each other to be in our humanity and in our humility together. And that's just had a huge impact on me in terms of how significant that is in the work we do.
And I can speak to that because I did both. I did some of the modules online and some in person. And yeah, we felt it online. I can say that I'll speak for myself. I felt it online for sure. I wonder if we could reflect a bit on, I'd love to hear more about how each of you, from your sort of different vantage points in being in the Institute, how the NARM community has grown since last time we met, or at least in this format a year ago. Because a year ago, the book had just come out, and then you were just getting ready to start the master's.
Well, I can speak about the master's training experience. I created a whole brand new curriculum for what we call the level 3 NARM master's therapist training. And it's been something that I've been kind of working on for years. And it was just such a wonderful opportunity to take this work, the base of the work that comes from level 1 OBT training or level 2 NARM therapist training that's introduced in the 2 books now, the NARM books, but to really take it to this much deeper level of what we call the level of intersubjectivity, which is really going much, much deeper into the relational model of NARM in a way that it's hard to describe right in this moment in words, but really has to do with bringing in more of the humanity of the therapist so that we have more access to our own complexity and richness of experience. And that allows us to have much more capacity to be with our clients' experience. And also it was kind of a culmination of a bunch of trainings that I've done over the years that we all got to be together for this next level. Personally, for me, receiving all the support and kindness, because when you put a new project together, you don't know how it's going to land, how people are going to receive it, how it's going to feel for me as the teacher. And I just felt so much support and just really enjoyed it. I keep on saying it was the highlight of my professional career, putting the material together and then bringing it to the community and just having the shared deepening and learning together. It was just such a really magical experience. So in terms of the expansion of the community, I think it was another step in our evolution of our community. And I think it's going to be the launching pad for kind of the next steps.
It's interesting just thinking about the arc of some people start in the OBT and the online basics training, our level 1 training. Some people start in level 2, but now we have the book. So I'm getting more and more students who have come into online basics training, which I teach, having read the book. So they come in with already like a wealth of information, as much as you can, glean from reading and doing those exercises, which is actually a lot. And I find that it's deepening the experience in the online basics training a lot, that some people are literally holding the book while I'm talking about whatever it is. And it's just really helping the integration of the material, because it's a lot to take in. And then, the people that go on to level 2, like even in level 1, I hear a lot of like, oh, I didn't know what I was getting into, in that, people sign up for professional training and the nature of this training is so deep, and they end up getting so much more than they bargained for, because the focus becomes about the internal world of the therapist and what's going on for the therapist or the helping professional. So it's a little bit of like, oh gosh. And then it's like, this is really great. I really like this. And then we get to level 3, and Brad's maiden voyage here of level 3, where it's really a deep dive into the intersubjective process. And you're working with all of these students who know exactly what they're getting into, and they just want more. And it was just such a rich experience. And there was you were there, Emily, we were all there, but there's just such a spirit of community that we got to have in that process. So I don't know if I'm really answering the question about the way the community is changing and growing, but I'm just really kind of reflecting on the arc of the process for people who start at level 1 and level 2 and then keep going. And kind of like what Marcia was saying earlier, in terms of people's willingness to really explore themselves and to see that as the avenue to being more professionally effective. And there is so much buy-in and openness to that at level 3. And the transformation that we got to witness as a result was just really remarkable and
Yeah.
powerful.
You know what? I think what I would speak to in terms of the NARM community from my role is the community of our training assistants. You know, one of the things we talk about in the training is educational trauma. And I mean, it's rare for me to come across somebody who hasn't had some of that in their experience. I certainly had it. And so in our trainings, we do try to create a model where we can support people in feeling like it's okay for them to show up and be themselves and be in the learning and not feel like they're worrying about making mistakes. And then we have this wonderful, generous community of training assistants that also have the same histories around being observed, being guided, being mentored. And we've really done a lot to create a kind of model of being with rather than being the expert. And from that place, I feel like we've really supported a training model that all the way through is layered with love and support. You know, I pulled a few quotes from some of the training assistants where they've said things like, "You invited us to show up in our humanity, heartfulness, and complexity in ways I haven't experienced anywhere else. I went from fear in past learning to heartfulness and love, learning to be gentle with myself and lean on the team for support versus to hide my fears and my vulnerabilities." And so for me, that has been a huge growth, is trying to create a learning environment for our training assistants that then can go down to the students that feel supportive and generous and make space for vulnerability and openness.
What Marcia was saying was making me think about in my earliest supervision right after graduate school, somebody said to me, my supervisor said, "It takes 7 years to be a good therapist." And I was like, oh God. But sure enough, right around the 6-year mark, like 6.5, I started to land in something and feel like, oh, like I have some mastery. It's just an interesting place that we are in the process of building the NARM community, which is more than just the NARM approach. It's this whole structure that we've put into place that is about how the training teams run and about the container that we create for the students to be able to feel safe, to learn or secure in their learning and showing up for the experiential aspects of it, all of that. And I was just thinking when Marcia was talking that we're sort of at that kind of 6.5-year mark. And some really felt this year like it kind of settled or landed in all of the work that we've put into creating, really intentionally creating a certain kind of community for professionals. There's something this year that really felt like, okay, we figured a lot out, and we keep saying we were, flying the plane while we were building it. And then somehow it feels like, oh, like this is what we were going for. I feel like we kind of hit that stride this year.
Right on time, right at that 6.5, 7-year mark. I'm curious, Marcia, just from what you were sharing earlier, I'm curious if there's any highlights. You brought that quote in, but I wonder if you have any other, moments of interacting with the TAs or with any students that might kind of illustrate some of that learning and the growth edges that you were describing.
Actually, what I would speak to is my own experience. And, coming off of what Stefanie was saying, I feel like what we've created here, the depth of what we created, has also made room for us to be in our own vulnerability and humanity. And as a community and as a team, I think it's been, for myself, I will just speak, much, much more possible for me to show up with my rough edges. And I mean, there was a moment even in the first module where something had come up for me and I thought I'd made a mistake or something. And I knew that I could work through it on my own, but I felt in that space able to bring it to the team in a way that it actually felt so transformative to be able to be myself vulnerable in a group of my peers in a way that in the past I might not have allowed. And I think that's a part of our work as clinicians. We need to be able to be, to acknowledge our own vulnerabilities or the places where we might make a misstep, as well as, to show up with our capacity to hold space for our clients in their own vulnerability. And I think for me, the most profound moment really was my own experience of it's okay to be me, and I'll still be loved and accepted and supported, maybe even more so.
Yeah. And I'll just say, from the student perspective, that certainly was felt. I don't know exactly what moment you're speaking to, Marcia, but it felt like it's okay to show up in what sometimes feels really messy because, the material for me, module 2 felt very, very messy. I was like rethinking a lot of things. And so I felt in my smaller group like I could show up and just be honest about where I was at and what I was grappling with in the material. And there was such a kind of a circle of support around me. I really felt that. So I imagine that trickles down from what you're describing, Marcia.
Mm,
Yeah.
indeed.
I would add that the word inclusivity is a word that we think about a lot, and coming from all these different backgrounds and different experiences, one of the really core tenets of NARM is really holding people's humanity and humanizing each other, or what we sometimes refer to as subjectification instead of objectification. And, Stephanie talked before about the learning environment and how much intention goes into it. We've spent, since the beginning of the NARM Training Institute, a lot of time and energy in conversations and difficult experiences and learning experiences around some of these issues that generally get kind of put into the diversity, inclusion, and belonging kind of category. And when you're working with complex trauma and the ways that people start to internalize objectification, both from the environment and then the ways that we end up doing that internally as well inside of ourselves, it then makes it very complex to be in learning environments with 50, 60, 70 people who don't have relationships, that don't have shared history, that don't have shared culture, often not even shared native language, because we have people from all around the world that come to our online trainings at least. And how do we navigate the differences of each of us, but not in a way that ends up reinforcing disconnection? And that is a huge task for our humanity, the 8 billion people on the planet, but it's also a big task for us in these training environments. And I feel really proud of the work we've done to try to be authentic, be willing to make mistakes and learn. All three of us as teachers have made numerous what we might call mistakes, and the intention to stay in relationship with people and to learn about their experiences, about our experiences, and to see if we can make repair. And often that ends up strengthening connection. Those are some of the highlights for me about those moments of deep connection, even when there's a lot of difference and even potentially conflict. And just a practical piece of that, we've been searching for years around different kind of outside training, because we don't want to just become an inclusive, professional community. So we've done and experimented with different kind of outside training too. We might have talked about this last year, but we found the theory of enchantment, which is Chloe Valdery's work, and we've brought some of her training into our staff and our training teams, and that was really enriching and felt very aligned to the trauma-informed work that we're practicing in NARM. And that led to us creating a DIB committee, a diversity, inclusion, belonging committee. And I've been reflecting on our committee, because we're not necessarily like creating things. We're not like necessarily creating new policies, or we're not kind of changing the curriculum. I mean, those things might be downstream, but we're really sitting together in relationship and building a certain kind of relational capacity to be with complexity, to be with difference, to be with conflict, to be with misunderstanding, to be with learning and unknowing. And there's something about just building that capacity together in a group of people from different parts of the world with different backgrounds that has been a huge highlight for me over the last year. I've really grown to feel very deeply connected to this group, and I love this group, and I'm looking forward to how that continues to kind of support our capacity as trainers with people from all sorts of different backgrounds, and also doing very sensitive work. We're in training that's doing very sensitive work. A lot of people have had religious trauma, cultural trauma, racial trauma, all sorts of different trauma that attacks our very sense of ourselves. And how do we trust other people to be there with us as we're kind of putting these pieces back together for ourselves in this community. I think it's been a really big highlight for me.
Mm. I'm wondering if the three of you can share, and maybe Stefanie, we'll start with you if that's okay. I'm curious if you can share what's been most fulfilling for you in the last year in your work.
That one's easy.
Yeah.
My favorite part of all of this is mentoring. Like, I mean, it's just been the most enriching. I mean, I guess mentoring is teaching. And, when I'm in a situation, whether it's a small active coaching group or a group case consult, even the larger group case consults, where I get to be working more directly with somebody and spending a little more time in my curiosity about their experience and really bringing the things we're teaching in NARM into the mentoring process to teach NARM. Like that to me is the sweet spot when we're being NARM in the process of supporting people to integrate NARM. Like there's nothing better. And I look forward to doing much, 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 much more of that.
Beautiful. And I didn't frame this question quite as thoroughly as I wanted to, but for both personally and professionally. So you talked about that. I don't know if there's anything you would add.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's professionally, it's so hard to separate those two things. It's professionally fulfilling, but it's personally fulfilling as well. It's like there's certain parts of everyone's job, I think, that are more energy giving and enlivening, and certain parts that might feel more draining. And like for me, when I get to be in that mentorship role, whether I'm mentoring TAs or I'm mentoring students, meaning that I'm working more directly with them when they're talking about a case or an active coaching, like it's very enlivening. I walk away from my computer because I'm doing it online. Yeah, feeling like that, like I am taking something away personally, as well as offering something professionally.
Great.
I mean, students and TAs and who know me well know that probably my most favorite part of NARM is the relational part, is the way in which the healing that happens inside of us is supported by the relational field. And in the master's class, we brought even more into that, the connection to just love and our heart. And for me, there's something that's deeply, deeply sacred and fulfilling and touching to be with students, clients, TAs in the space where I'm able to support them in touching into something in themselves that maybe they didn't even know was there. Often in our consults, we don't just focus on the client, we focus on the student or the TA's, the therapist's internal experience. And whether it's with in active coaching or in consults, it just feels to me like so sacred and such a privilege to be a part of being able to support people in connecting to themselves in a deep way that then helps them to be able to be in their work in a deeper way relationally. And it also touches me in amplifying my own ability to see what's alive in my relationship. It's just like being together in that sacred way where we bring kind of heartfulness and openness and vulnerability to the self-inquiry, including my own, is probably the most fulfilling part of the work for me. There's some deep connections that can happen when we're supporting people and touching into those places in themselves that they might not have even known were there.
I'm going to piggyback off of the word Marcia's used, which is connections. For me, personally, connection, just even this connection here with the four of us and the connections from all the different trainings this year and all the different consult groups and all the different demo workshops and webinars and all the different things we've done this year together as a NARM professional community. I just enjoy each one of them. I enjoy each different experience, and they all have different, all three of you know, every group has a different personality, and you just don't know what you're getting into. And that's part of the fun of it, of just like really surrendering to all of the complexity and the different ways that people show up, and that how that ends up becoming a group personality as well. So I just love the connections, and that's very fulfilling for me personally. And professionally, I think just continuing to go into greater depth into the model. I love teaching, OBT and level 2, but it was very fulfilling for me to start to really go to where I've been waiting to go for a long time. And you can't just jump there. I mean, we have to kind of build the platform that we can start to go into it, because it's for many people, it's uncharted territory. It can be kind of scary territory. And at the very least, it's not territory that you really can do on your own. It really is designed to be in relationship. And even better that we get to do this together in a community, so that the depth of the work that we've been able to continue to create and to deepen into. I just love being part of a community that other people are interested in that and want to participate and share in that.
What's been the most challenging thing? Who would be willing to speak up to the most challenging thing for this year? Stefanie, you're leaning in.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. What's the most challenging thing? I mean, there are so many challenges. I don't have an answer yet.
I can save you here for a moment here, Stefanie.
Okay, good. I'll keep thinking.
Because I'm going to use Stephanie's kind of analogy about the 6.5-year kind of process. It's like sometimes what's so interesting is like right when you're kind of solving one big thing, it's like then the next thing becomes available to you, and that's part of this unfinished discovery process that we're always going to be on. It's like, in some ways, there's a saying, sometimes this gets used in a not nice way, but it's like, God gives you what you have the capacity to deal with. And sometimes that's used in a kind of blaming or whatever. But if you take it just at face value, I mean, the idea of that is that, like, once you have a certain capacity, now you have the ability to deal with the next challenge ahead of you. And then you're going to kind of meet that challenge, and then you're going to develop new capacities from that challenge. And then you get to the next level. And I think that for me, we've definitely been in that this year. We were kind of a startup training organization. All of us have had some experiences in other training organizations, but none of us had experience running a training organization, which is a whole different experience. We're all therapists and teachers. We're not business people and academic advisors and stuff. And so we've been learning on the fly. There was a lot of pain points along the way. And I think Stefanie's right. I think we really kind of hit a certain place in the last year where things started to settle, and that then opened up the next kind of part of our process. And so, how we navigate some of the organizational changes, the programmatic changes, bringing on new folks. I mean, all of that expansion stuff is also really wonderful, but also challenging. And I know for myself, it's been all the organizational work has been a lot for me. And so I think getting into the trainings feels like a vacation for me, because once we're actually in there, it's just pure joy for the most part for me to be part of those. But the background work continues to be, for me, very challenging. And just want to make a shout out to the amazing staff we have. It takes time to find the right people too. You don't just find the right people when you start out of the gate. And it's taken us, 5-6 years now, so almost 7 years, to find just a really great core group of people that most listeners, most people that are in our trainings can't even put faces to these names. And they're incredibly supportive, that allow us to do the work that we can do with all the students. And, we give them little shout outs, but, they really have supported us in such important ways. And so we want to honor also just our organizational staff that allows us to do this great work.
Yeah, it makes me think about bandwidth, like with a startup, each person really needs to be like 3 people. But they're not. They're one person. And so everybody is kind of just trying to do as much as they possibly can. And again, I agree with Brad, like that has been one of the biggest struggles. And it does feel like we're starting to figure out like how to have the right person in the right seat. And so that everybody isn't scrambling and going way beyond their bandwidth in ways that, isn't even ultimately going to get us there. So that's one thing that comes up as a challenge. It's just been a lot for a few people to hold and figure out. Yeah, there was something else I was going to say beyond bandwidth. Oh, we have all this intention and are really thinking hard about the way we want to design things, but then real learning happens by like hitting walls. And we have just hit some very painful walls. And I mean, that's brought the biggest learning. And I remember that in my therapist career too. I remember, figuring out things by by things going really, really wrong in very painful ways. And we've had a lot of that in this process. And it's very unpleasant when it's happening. But every time we've come out the other side and we've learned something really, really important from it. Yeah, it's not about getting into the specifics of it. I think what I'm talking about is pretty much true for any organization that's trying to find itself. You're gonna really hit some walls, and sometimes you hit them hard.
Yeah. That's so universal, not just in organizations, but we as humans, right? Like as
Exactly.
individuals. Yeah.
But I do. I feel like that's happening less.
hmm
We figured a lot out. And I think we all know there's always going to be blind spots. And we're an organization that's going to continue to be in self-inquiry and continue to reflect on what our blind spots are and what our biases are. So, because we're always going to be growing.
Well, and if it's okay if I share just from what I witnessed in that third module of the level 3, it's cool to watch the three of you. And I know that there's so many layers, like there's so many more people that are sort of behind the scenes, but it's cool to watch the three of you support each other and sort of give each other heads up. Like, I see this, I see that, and helping each other learn.
It takes a village.
It takes a village. I love it.
Yeah.
I was going to just reflect on something you just said, Emily, about the three of us, because it's like in a family system. I mean, if the parents have a relatively secure relationship, you can withstand a lot, actually. You can really create a buffer for the children. I mean, it doesn't mean they're still not going to be impacted, but you can really create a lot of security. And, this could sound to listeners like a rosy thing, but people really don't understand how much Stefanie, Marcia, and I really support each other. We've gone through a lot of really hard stuff together, personally, collectively, between the two of us here or there. And, if we're going to walk the talk, it's about how it lives within us as the leaders of this organization. And these two people here that I'm sitting here with, besides you, Emily, we've really walked through the fire, and we're still arm in arm. And, we talked a lot. It was very touchy feely about how much we love each other and care about each other, and how much our relationships have impacted us both professionally and personally. But I think that also comes through, because I know I've been in a lot of training organizations over the years, and I've been, in a lot of different environments. And I do think, things trickle down from the top. And so when there's like lack of transparency, or when there's like not practicing what they're preaching, or, all that kind of stuff, people do feel it, even if they don't know. And so even within all of the different challenges we've had, I just feel so deeply grateful for the relationship and the strength of our relationship, the three of us.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I feel proud of some of how we've really handled some really challenging situations. I'm thinking about one where Stefanie and I were in a training, an OBT, and, there were some really kind of tender, challenging questions that got brought to us in the Q&A. And we took so much time afterwards to go back and look at, how did we handle that? What was going on for us? What might have gotten in the way of us being able to respond in the way that we wanted to? And then we talked to Brad, and then we all looked at it together, and then we're able to really come back and show up in a different way. And, some of the challenges that I think of are really more my own challenges, that when I hit up against a place in myself where something is, a pain point, and then to have the opportunity with Brad and with Stefanie to look at that, to have an honest and kind of supported inquiry into what's going on with me, then allows me to come back into it with just a lot more capacity. And I feel like, that is a way we really walk the walk of what we teach.
Yeah. My observation was just what I was trying to capture with my words, and I don't know that it's totally possible to do that. But like you said, Brad, we may not know the specifics, the trickle down, but we do feel it in the field, like the support that each of you have for each other, that connection, and the way that you all have each other's backs, and how that impacts the Institute and TAs and students and all of that. So yeah, I'm very appreciative of the work that you all have clearly done to have that kind of support for each other.
Well, you guys are talking about it. I'm having kind of like a highlight reel in my head of like my worst moments. And like every time I have one of my worst moments, if I go to Brad, if I go to Marcia, I just get support.
Yeah.
Like my worst moments are met with complete support.
Yeah.
And It's all the difference in the world.
I came across a quote. You both know that I love quotes. This was a James Baldwin quote, and it feels really appropriate in this moment. He says, "The longer I live, the more deeply I learn that love, whether we call it friendship or family or romance, is the work of mirroring and magnifying each other's light. Gentle work, steadfast work, life-saving work in those moments when life and shame and sorrow occlude our own light from our view, but there is still a clear-eyed, loving person to beam it back. In our best moments, we are that person for one another."
Beautiful.
Feel like we are that people for one another.
Mhm. I wonder if in our remaining time, can we talk a little bit about what's coming up, looking ahead to 2024?
It's always exciting to kind of look forward to the next year and kind of mark the completion of the year. This is why it's really fun to do this. And yeah, we have some exciting changes and updates and, new ideas that we're going to be sharing with the professional community. I think one of the things that Marcia, Steph, and I have really kind of, sometimes these things just happen organically. So I don't know, sometimes we call it like the secret sauce of NARM or something. That the secret sauce is that people come into these trainings for a clinical training or a professional training, and they leave it feeling different as a human being. And so I think the secret sauce is that we're really more and more interested in the inner development of the human that's in the role of a therapist or helping professional. And if you think about it, I mean, I've taught undergraduate programs, I've taught graduate programs. This is what generally brings people into this field. They're not coming into it to make a lot of money. That's not why people come to become, mental health professionals. They come because they're interested in the inner world of humans. And then unfortunately, we don't get that fulfilled. We're not like our education, our training, usually our early work experiences in the field, they don't reflect that. Many people grow cynical. Many people feel lonely. Just many people feel unfulfilled. And then they just kind of rely on what they're doing to kind of continue with their career. But there's something often that they know that they're missing. And so then those are the people that start to read more, research more, look for trainings. They come into our training, and we are just most interested in the human, not the student, not the therapist, but the human that's sitting there with us. And that's where that support that Stefanie was just referring to comes from, because we are in this together and we want to support each other as humans. And I think about three different levels. I think about the personal level of development, the relational level, the interpersonal level, and then the transpersonal or the spiritual. And all three of those are crucial to be an effective clinician, effective therapist, and to be a more whole human being. And so the programs and the ideas that Stefanie, Marcia, and I have been talking about are going to be, how do we start to go deeper into supporting the inner world of the therapist within this community that we've already established? And I'm so excited about it. I can feel little shivers as I'm talking about it. Some of it we don't even have fully mapped out. They're just kind of rough ideas, and some we have a little bit more fully mapped out. But I couldn't ask for better partners to do this, and I couldn't ask for a better community to do this. And so it's just super exciting. And we're going to be sharing, some more details soon about some of these ideas and programs. And yeah, just really exciting as I think about 2024.
I got those same chills and shivers. I'm so excited to see what y'all are cooking up.
I guess it's on a need to know basis.
Okay.
we can't say much more than that yet.
Pretty much
But
sums it up.
yeah, I think it's cute that everyone's getting goosies while we're talking about it. I feel like natural development from where we are now, especially with the master's material and what we're exploring there. It's kind of like to keep going in that direction.
I just was going to add, when I first started going through the new material that Brad was sharing with us in the master's class, and then, we began to actually teach it in our breakout groups, and certainly Brad as the trainer, it really hit me. This should be in every graduate school.
Yeah.
It's, it's coming out of the NARM model, but in a way, this exploration of the intersubjectivity in the work, the relationality in the work, and the significance of us being able to do our own work to see what might be getting in the way of us being able to show up and support what the client is needing to connect to in themselves is hopefully, to me, can have broader application, and maybe we can invite, a broader community into our training programs. So I'm excited about that because I think it would enhance a lot of the mental health field if there was more attention to the therapist's part in doing their own work.
And I want to just add, I've been saying this recently, people have heard me say this, but this inner work, this inner development, it doesn't belong to NARM. It doesn't belong to any psychological or spiritual or religious model. It belongs to us as humans. And it's wonderful to have frameworks that feel aligned for us and communities that feel aligned for us. But at the end of the day, it's important because it's very easy to get dogmatic about it. And I can imagine a listener listening to this that's not part of our community, and it could, it might sound a certain way, but it's not about the model. It's not even about the community. Those are just vehicles for us to access something that's there waiting to be accessed. And there's many other pathways to it. We're not saying that this is the only psychological model or pathway, but this is the one that we're excited about, that we're going to be continuing to develop.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad. Well, I want to thank each of you for making the time. I know coordinating everyone's schedules is a big deal. So thank you for spending this time together. And is there anything else before we end off?
Yeah, I think the culmination of everything we've been talking about is, we're living in a time right now where there's just a lot of disconnection. There's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of violence. And the only antidote to that I see is connection, and is depth, and is heart, and humanization of this process. And, again, there's different pathways to get there, but the outer world that we're living in is reflecting the inner world of all 8 billion people on this planet. And so, sometimes this comes up in trainings because people feel like, they're not doing enough for the world. And we often end with this in these conversations, but it is such a deeply activist approach to be doing this inner healing work with clients, because they are then changing their inner world in a way that then impacts and reflects out to the outer world. And no policies or no dogma can change those inner states. It's not that we want to shy away from making the changes that are going to support humans, but at the end of the day, the change has to come from the inside out. And so I look at this as a deeply human rights process that we're really helping through psychotherapy, which is our specialty, humans to go out back into their families, to their communities, to their culture, to their religion, to their societies, and be organized differently internally so that we can bring greater organization into the world. That's just really my deepest hope here for what we're doing. So yes, it's a professional training, and we're hoping people will get much more effective as therapists for working with complex trauma. But at the end of the day, it really is a vehicle for hopefully deep personal and collective transformation.
Love it. Well, thank you each again for this New Year episode, reflecting and looking forward to the future. I appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode. To find more about our guest and their work, check the show notes or visit us at narmtraining.com/transformingtrauma. Are you working with clients or populations dealing with the effects of adverse childhood experiences and complex trauma? If so, we invite you to consider joining us to become trained in the neuroaffective relational model in support of trauma-informed care. We are excited to offer psychoeducational and clinical trainings for a variety of mental health professionals. For more information on these NARM trainings and to apply, please visit www.narmtraining.com/schedule. Thanks to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for producing and editing, to Tori Essex for our album art, and to Brad Kammer for the creation of this podcast. We look forward to building community, connection with you, and changing the world by transforming trauma.